Welcome to the Made in the Mist podcast, a podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. Now please welcome your hosts, Emma and Dan.
Welcome back to another amazing episode of the Made in the Mist podcast. So we're here at the Niagara Falls Innovation Hub in the Money Mint podcast studio. As always, I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Emma. How you doing?
Hey, everybody.
And again, we're keeping the trail hot here. We have some amazing guests, and today we have none other than Rollo, the current Vice President of Corporate Affairs for Arterra Wines. Del, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me here. Excited to be here.
Yeah, no, we're excited to have you here. We know we've been going back and forth trying to get you in the studio. Now we're really, really excited. And again, this is a show for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs where we get to listen to the tips and tricks, their secret sauce to success, and what made them the entrepreneurs they are today. And we know that Del has a fascinating life, born and raised in Niagara, spent some time away, and then always come back home. So Del, growing up in the Niagara region, within a vicinity close to, a lot of wineries, what kind of made you want to be in this space?
Oh, I think I probably fell into a little bit. Truthfully, I was probably a horrible student, just to be honest with you. And I remember looking, my mom's like, well, where are you going to go to school? And I'm like, I don't know. What will take me? So I looked around and my grade point average, the only thing that would take me was hospitality and tourism. Yeah. And so I applied I was Guelph and Ryerson, I guess it's called TMU now, right?
TMU, yeah, exactly.
And I was accepted to Ryerson, and I worked in the hotel industry a little bit. I worked up in Muskoka Sands up in Gravenhurst, which was, I think it's called Taboo now, just because I'm aging myself. And then also Deerhurst Resort.
Yes,
and
great place.
Went to school for hospitality. And when you're in Toronto, great place to do it because you end up being surrounded by the best hotels and stuff around. And fast forward, I ended up working for Four Seasons Hotels, and I became a sommelier while I was there. I was managing Truffles, the only 5 diamond restaurant in Canada.
Wow.
And was a cork dork, right? So
that's the question is, I'm assuming at the time the wine industry wasn't that big in Canada, right? It was just kind of coming up. So what made you want to be a sommelier?
Well, you know what? When you're working in that kind of atmosphere like the Four Seasons, it's all about food and culinary and everything that's there. And there was a guy who was the manager of Truffles before I was, and he actually hired me to work in the Studio Cafe many years before. And when he left to go become a winemaker, ironically, he said, I think the guy to run Truffles is this guy. And he said, the only problem is you didn't have a sommelier certification. So I went and I think that was my first entrepreneurial thing is I didn't have it. So I went to my boss, the GM of the hotel, and said, what do you think about bringing George Brown College to our hotel and using our wine cellar to do a sommelier program for our staff? So they brought the actual sommelier training to the Four Seasons. And at that time, every 2 weeks we had winemakers dinners. So I had the privilege that nobody else doing their sommelier training had Baroness Philippine de Rothschild teaching you about Bordeaux and Angelo Gaia teaching you about Italy. And so we had this unbelievable moment to have A, the best wines to taste, but B, to be able to meet the sort of first families of wine from around the world. And once you get hooked into that, you can't get away from it. It's just the most amazing experience.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, and wine is kind of an international language. Everybody, I mean, and one of the oldest, types of beverage around, right? So fantastic that you were able to do that. So manager of the Truffles restaurant, sommelier, and then where did that shift come where you said, I want to move to Niagara where there's going to be a presence of wines and kind of get into where you are now?
Well, there's 3 parts to this story. So the number one part is you guys have all heard of Donald Zeraldo, I'm
yes.
sure. Yeah.
He's actually coming to the hub tomorrow.
Well, there you go. So Zeraldo had a place across the street from the Four Seasons, and he would come in all the time bugging me to sell more of his wine as the sommelier, right? So I was selling a lot of his ice wine, his Montague Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And he just, if it sounds like you've met him. If you haven't met him, he's got a magnetic personality and people are drawn to him. So we all were, and he kind of was of the same ilk as the Angelo Gaias and Michael Mondavis and all these other people. Mm-hmm. And then I met another guy named Don Triggs, and Don Triggs was the CEO of Vincor, which was our company at the time. And I sat next to Don at an event at the Four Seasons, and at the end of it, he asked me if I wanted to go, help open the Jackson-Triggs winery. And I'm like, well, that sounds interesting. I didn't say yes immediately, though, because I was still a Four Seasons corporate guy. And I remember I got the job offer to go to the Four Seasons in Dallas.
Oh, wow.
To be their director of food and beverage. My wife's a chef, so she was offered to be a sous chef. And I came home that night and said, hey, honey, it looks like we're moving to Dallas, because I was a corporate guy.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife said something sort of tongue-in-cheek. She goes, well, it looks like we need to buy a pickup truck and a shotgun.
Still true to this day.
I stayed awake all night long that night. I'm like, I don't know if she likes this idea.
Yeah, exactly.
And that idea of coming to Niagara made a lot of sense. So we packed everything up, our firstborn as well at that point. And we moved out to Niagara to be part of the opening team of Jackson-Triggs.
That's fantastic. So first of all, just, wife a chef, you a sommelier. I think your dinner parties must be just unbelievable.
Yeah. There's a reason why I can't get rid of my kids.
Yeah, exactly.
They're all adults now. They're still living at home, but they get good food and they have free booze. So
it's
not too bad.
Wow, that's what a opportunity.
It sounds like Niagara kind of was that perfect fit, gave a little bit of that. You could balance family a little bit more. So what was it like first day on the job? Were you excited? Were you ambitious? Did you feel entrepreneurial?
Well, it was scary, right? I came from a very structured organization. The Four Seasons was probably the best training ground ever to be in if you wanted to be at the top echelon of hospitality. But they had a format and they knew how they were doing things. And I came suddenly to this role where Don Triggs wanted me to come in because of my Four Seasons pedigree. That was the main reason. And suddenly they're in there saying, okay, what do you want to do with this winery? How do you want it to work? And I'm like,
so right off the bat, you got given the golden key.
And he introduced me to his wife, Elaine Triggs, who also was she had an amazing background. Was a certified general accountant as well as had a degree in design and home economics, right? So you guys work together and sort out the front of house stuff with the winemaker and let's design a winery. And so suddenly I was in this position where well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, so there's not a committee. There's not someone and I got to make a lot of interesting decisions. I made mistakes, but I made a lot of good decisions at the same time too. And it was a lot of fun.
So when you were at Jackson-Triggs, you mentioned you made a couple of early mistakes. Are those relevant to today's journey? Do you want to share any of those early mistakes you made?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you learn from everything that you do, right? And so, Jackson-Triggs is a great example. I mean, this is very utilitarian, but there's nowhere near enough storage.
Yeah,
we didn't think about we didn't know we were going to get 250,000 visitors a year, right? There was so much unknowns at that point. Is that what it is?
250?
Like when they opened, it was like that.
It just took off, right? And it was the new shiny toy, and there was only 7 wineries in Niagara-on-the-Lake at that time. So, and it was it was the first modern big winery that was in Ontario in Canada.
The same design that it is today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic, beautiful.
Right. So it was, but we just didn't know what to expect. And once you start to see the flow of traffic coming through, right? I would have made the retail store twice the size of what it is. It's too small right now. I would have probably used different surfaces than Carrera marble because it chipped a lot. And
but that's nice.
The architects call it patina, by the way, the little round red wine stains.
Yeah.
So I guess you went into it not thinking of the scale of how big it could get. You kind of, it was more sounded architectural design and you wanted to be a thing of beauty.
Yeah. It was very aspirational when we opened it up. I mean, we knew because our company owned Inniskillen, we knew Inniskillen was probably the most visited winery in North America in the time, but we didn't think that Jackson-Triggs had that immediate draw, right? Because Inniskillen was a globally recognized wine because of ice wine, etc. Right.
So Inniskillen, the busiest in North America at the time. So bigger than the ones in California.
Yeah, no, it's amazing.
Napa Valley. Yeah.
At one point, our company was owned by Constellation Brands, right?
That's right.
And when we were owned by Constellation, I had the chance to tour Napa, and I was at Mondavi. I met Robert Mondavi, all that kind of stuff, and we're talking to them. And as we're talking to them, they're like, I'm like, so how many people do you see here at Mondavi? Because anyone would probably believe that winery is the most visited winery in North America.
It makes sense, right?
Yeah. And they're like, oh, in a good year, 125,000. And
No
I'm like,
way.
So, I mean, the key to this, though, and the important thing for you to understand is we are probably both blessed and cursed that we see 13 million people or whatever per year to Niagara Falls.
Yes, exactly.
Well, explain that. Why are we cursed? Let's start with the bad, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think, you can, and I think most tourism operators in Niagara can rest on their laurels of, I know I'm always going to have a new person come to visit.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
And so the ability to always try to reinvent yourself and try harder, I think sometimes we and I say the collective we as an industry, if we tried harder, we probably could be 15, 16, 17 million.
Sure.
It's about how do you get more repeat visitation,
Yes.
and not just
Absolutely.
that one time trip to the falls or to Niagara Lake, right? So I think that's probably the curse. The blessing is that you have 13 million people.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm assuming with the wine industry, you're probably going to have a lot more returning people compared to you see the falls once the falls don't change, but wineries they can change. They can have new wines come out. They can have new brands come out, things like that too. So do you see a lot of these returning guests? Are you guys trying to make that trend in Niagara Lake? Yeah.
Yeah, we do a lot of research and data capture to try to understand who our consumers are. And the interesting part about the brand Jackson-Triggs was, which is different than Inniskillen, is we built the brand first for Jackson-Triggs.
Okay.
It was all made out of our Niagara Falls facility.
Yes.
And then we built the winery afterwards. So we knew who our consumers were. So in many cases, Jackson-Triggs is the number one selling brand in Canada, right? Like across the country, it is more than anything else. And so there's a lot of people who believe they're coming to see Mecca, basically.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Right? Like I've been drinking this forever. I need to come. So those are for first-time visitors. And then you have others who haven't heard of Jackson-Triggs, which is there's still a lot of those people. And then they come and you try to cultivate relationships with all of them. And it's really about if we deliver the best possible experience at Jackson-Triggs, then they're going to land on that product when they go to the liquor store, when they go to the restaurant.
Exactly.
And there's a unique thing about wine. It sounds kind of kitschy, but every glass of wine is a memory.
Yes.
It's funny because with coffee, you can't, hey, what were you doing when you had coffee 2 weeks ago? You don't remember,
No,
right?
Well, especially when you drink too
But
much
if I
coffee.
said to you, when you had wine last week, what were you doing? You tend to remember every part of what you were doing, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise.
Sure. Yes.
So if we deliver a great experience, people will land on our product, and then they try to recreate that experience again when they're at their home, when they're at the restaurant, or otherwise, and then they tell the stories, and then more people buy your product.
Yeah.
Right?
So what was that first year, to go back? You said, 200,000 in the first year. What was that like?
It was pretty crazy. I mean, just the opening of it, there's a lot of anticipation in the wine industry. Really, in Ontario, for sure, no one had spent that kind of money. There was a bit of jockeying for a position, too, because Peller decided to open up the Peller Winery within 2 weeks of ours. It was the two of us were kind of going at the same time. And so there was a bit of competitive rivalry between who's going to open first, who's going to do what's going to happen. In the end, I thought a lot of the folks from Peller are good friends of mine too. And we look back, and I know John Peller's a good friend as well. We look back on it, and it couldn't have been better because Peller really designed that sort of real traditional sort of French chateau look, what most people expect to find. We went for that modern sort of barn structure. Mm-hmm. So every consumer that came did both, right? It wasn't like we were stealing from one or the other. They needed to see both and we both delivered it in a completely different experience.
Well, and that's still the beauty of it. I mean, like, how many wineries are in Niagara Lake right now today?
Oh, I think there's probably 38 now in Niagara Lake.
Right.
There's 140
in the region.
and 180 in Ontario, right? So
exactly. So, but again, a lot of these people, they just go for the experience of that winery. So it allows you to kind of pave your own path and be unique. I just want to go back for two questions. First is when you were sommelier, working at the Truffles, I'm assuming there was other sommeliers there as well too.
Yep.
So how did you separate yourself from the rest to land these opportunities, to land meetings with Don Zeraldo, to land meetings with, Don Triggs, how were you, like, what did you do as an individual to say, I'm going to take advantage of these opportunities. I'm going to make sure I give it my best because I see the future here.
Yeah. I think I've always been, it's kind of weird. My wife would tell you something. You guys have just met me. You probably say I'm a pretty outgoing, extroverted individual, right?
Exactly.
Which in my professional life I am. When I get home at night, I like to get in my cocoon and sort of just do my own thing and not be bothered, right? So I've always been an extroverted person from a work perspective. I think learning the craft of hospitality in an organization like the Four Seasons, and in particular, the Four Seasons in Yorkville, where I was, which was sort of the home base for Four Seasons worldwide.
Sure.
I was afforded the opportunity to interact with Isidore Sharp, who's literally one of the most amazing entrepreneurs on the planet Earth, the founder of Four Seasons, and his wife Rosalie, and I took advantage of every one of those opportunities, right? I mean, it was just,
and you learned from them.
Oh, for sure,
you extracted their best qualities,
and you were given opportunities because of it, right? And
sure.
and I know, but the irony is I look back at that cohort of people that I worked with at the hotel. For whatever reason, they've all become captains of industry, right? Like all of my friends, like I've got friends who are the general managers of hotels in Cambodia now that I worked with.
Okay.
One of them's the GM at the Shangri-La in Toronto. And like, they just cultivated great people. So I don't know that I was better, or don't know if I stood out from the rest. I think, my path was probably a little bit different coming to wine. A lot of them stayed in the hotel industry, but they teach you very well there
So they build on those soft skills,
Yeah.
right? And what are some of the soft skills that you think that you attained, that kind of, and everybody in that cohort that made you become the people you are today?
I think the soft skills of learning how to listen, try to adapt. One of the things that it's kind of funny, right? In our company, if you talk to our marketing department, they'll say, all right, well, we have to create a script for all the staff so that they're all saying the exact same thing. And the Four Seasons was great because they had core standards, but they wanted you to deliver those standards in your own personal way to make it authentic and real.
Perfect.
Right? And when you can be authentic and be real, and everybody's sort of handled that way, it allows you to sort of create your own sort of personal identity. You're still delivering everything that the Four Seasons wanted as far as core standards of service, but you do it in your way as it's part of
like
the DNA of Dell, right?
Like a genuinity, if that's even a word, genuinity. Yeah,
I think it is now.
Saying it
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I think we just made up a word. Demure today,
Demure.
genuinity.
We'll just add it.
Yeah,
add it in.
exactly. So again, I guess, to the listeners out there is, always being genuine, being the person you are, but with the knowledge base that you've been taught, kind of affords you these opportunities.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic. So the second question is we keep referring to Jackson-Triggs, but you were telling that the founder, or at the time the general manager, the CEO, was Don Triggs. So where did the Jackson come in?
Yeah, so Don Triggs and Alan Jackson are the two names that are on Jackson-Triggs.
Okay.
The two of them, talk about entrepreneurial spirit, they both met each other working for the Labatt wine business when Labatt owned
Labatt wine business.
Labatt owned wine business, and there was like there was Cartier wines and Brights and all this kind of stuff.
Cartier, they're still around.
Oh, yeah.
They make
they're
that
part of
bubbly?
us. Yeah.
That bubbly, yeah, exactly.
So the two of them met, and Labatt had decided at some point that they were going to go and focus just on beer, and they wanted to sell off the wine business.
Oh, okay.
And Don Triggs had left the business. He was off in the UK somewhere, and Alan Jackson called and said, hey, they're selling the business. I want to keep my job, blah, blah, blah. So Don and Alan did a leverage buyout with all their, remortgaged their homes. There was line staff that chipped in whatever they could. They did a leverage buyout of the business. I can't remember the exact amount, but they started day one being about $250 million in debt, right?
No way.
And day one was about like, what do I do? And I've heard stories talk about entrepreneurial spirit. They didn't have a lot of money. They didn't have a lot of capital. They're trying to figure out how to keep this going. At one point, Dave Nickel, who's the original Mr. President's Choice,
Yes,
called and said, hey, I hear you guys got big tanks. And Alan Jackson's like, yeah. And says, can you make iced tea in those? We want to make President's Choice iced tea. and they did whatever they could to be able to make that. And then the two of them said, well, we need to create a brand that is going to really be that brand that takes us off. And proprietorship was something that was pretty big back in the New World wine industry,
Yes.
Whether it was Mondavi, Kendall Jackson. You think of all these sort of big brands, they had the name of someone on it.
Yes.
So the two of them
create their own name.
Jackson-Triggs. And as the story goes, it actually, the first iteration that they came up with was Triggs Jackson. And they took it to the LCBO at the time and said, what do you think of Triggs Jackson? And they said, oh, like Briggs Stratton, the lawnmower company?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
And then Jackson-Triggs came to life out of it. They just inverted it.
Wow.
And created the brand. And Alan was always the sort of the winemaking scientist side. He graduated with his doctorate, I think, in chemistry or biology at a McMaster, and Don was the Western Ivy Business School,
entrepreneur,
packaged goods guy, and the two of them was a good partnership.
You got the innovator and the entrepreneur coming forward in that perfect team. And are either of them still with us?
Yep. Don. I can't remember the exact year. I think it was 2005. Vincor was acquired by Constellation Brands,
yes,
which was the largest wine company in the world at the time. And Don retired at that point. Well, not retired. He decided to go buy a vineyard in the Okanagan and start another winery, a family winery called Culmina. the irony is we ended up buying Culmina from him a few years back.
There you go.
And Don has moved back to Niagara Lake, and he's retired there now with Elaine. And Alan Jackson still is doing some stuff in the wine industry. So you may have seen the wine brand Don't Poke the Bear.
Yes.
You know, he was part of that launch, and he's done some other wine brands that he's done as a little side hustle. But I think he likes playing golf a lot these days.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, it's amazing how much business can be, that can come through wine.
Mm-hmm.
How many brands? How many? I mean, you can argue there's a certain amount of different wines you can make, different flavor profiles, but there's just so many brands that replicate that, right?
Absolutely.
It's a fantastic. So, sorry, that was just a little bit of knowledge I needed to know based on that. I'm going to pass it over to you.
No, I was just going to ask, so once Jackson-Triggs was off the ground, how long did you stay as a part of like that core operation? Like, was that, was it constant challenges? Was it year over year, growing? Did you have constant growth? Did you run into any roadblocks? What happened with Powder?
My career trajectory was interesting. So my main office was at Jackson-Triggs for, 17, 18 years of my 24, 25. But I was in charge of Jackson-Triggs for, I'm not going to get the timeline right, but let's say it was 2 or 3 years. Then Inniskillen needed some help. We the whole idea of core standards of service and so on made some sense. So they said, would you take over Inniskillen as well? So I was managing both of those. And then we did the joint venture with the Soyos Indian Band out in the Okanagan.
Yes.
And the Incomeep winery was being designed, and they asked if I'd be part of the design team for that. So I was doing the stuff in Ontario, but then out there, and then that segued into them saying, hey, you should manage all the wineries across Canada.
Jeez.
And then I was...
What was that moment like when they said that? Was that
it's pretty cool, right?
Like I made it. No, well, I made it, right? Like, I'm managing the largest wine company in Canada, and from somebody who was a sommelier and server to now managing, that must have been a surreal moment for you.
That was wild. I mean...
Is the first person you called your wife, or say, honey,
I did
it?
It was scary, right? Yeah. Because you're like, now I have this national view, and you have employees across the country, and trying to deal with the cultural differences between BC and Ontario, and also the cultural differences of knowing that you're interacting with the Aboriginal community, and everything that goes along with that. So it was scary, but super exciting, right? To be able to go and be part of that. And I remember even the Okanagan was, Niagara was probably a bit more advanced than the Okanagan at that point. And so I had this opportunity to be there at not the beginning, but at a very big point of change. And I remember even Don Triggs taking us all out there when he gathered everyone from the sales and marketing team, and we're all standing at an empty field, and he goes, this is what we call the project, the big idea. And I'm like, everybody's like, what's the big idea? It says, we just negotiated a joint venture with the Soyos Indian Band, where we're going to be opening up a winery. And as part of the relationship, we're also getting access to 2,000 acres of land that we're going to plant with vineyards.
Wow.
In the prime land, and it's going to be a long-term relationship, and that was a pivotal moment for the entire Okanagan Valley to see that whole change happen, and you sort of just sit there, and the vision to be able to be part of that whole process was really, really cool. So
no, I mean, amazing, and I'm assuming that the vision was that were you growing these grapes on Aboriginal lands, and that was kind of the partnership to say, listen, we're gonna produce fruit on your property, and they were obviously happy with that solution too.
Yeah, well, and the interesting part, to be honest with you, was the Soyos Indian Band have been growing, and again, I won't get the date right, but since the late 60s, they have had vineyards. They were some of the first people to plant vineyards in the Okanagan.
Come on, really? Wow.
Yeah, a gentleman named Sam Baptiste, who's still alive to this day, and that sort of vision of that sort of start was there, and that's why the Indigenous community had a real understanding that there was a real opportunity here. Mm-hmm. And again, that's you go back to Sam Baptiste and Clarence Louis, the chief. They saw that this is probably the future of that region, and invested in it heavily with us. So
well, and their ROI, the return on the investment for them, as a community now, they have constant revenue coming in off of their lands that perhaps weren't producing much.
Well, now they have a winery, they have a resort that they've got called Spirit Ridge, which is amazing down in the Soyos. Wow. They have construction company, they have a golf course. Like it's just this massive thing. And even we have a big commercial facility there in Oliver, and that our commercial facility, which makes 5 or 6 million cases of wine a year.
Jeez, wow.
Is on band land that we lease.
Wow.
And we also employ a lot of their band members there, right? Wow. So it's a great partnership.
Wow. So to be able to see the, I guess, more like revitalization and bringing that there. So that team, you were already coming in, you had built something in Niagara, and then the partnership to get it off the ground was amazing. So how did that operation, what was the timeline on that one to get that off the ground, and how long were you in that position?
Yeah, well, I mean, getting at least Inkami off the ground, I think it was probably a couple of years to get the winery built.
Because it sounds like even at this point you were wearing a lot of hats at this point. Yeah. You were wearing a lot of hats. Yeah.
A lot of little projects, but I mean, as you start, the most important thing is to be surrounded by a team that's even stronger than you are, right? So I had amazing people that I was working with, and so you have trust with all of them to be able to go and do their things, and then interjecting yourself to go in there and to be able to participate in some of these special projects is kind of the fun part of the job, right? Mm-hmm.
So you spent some time in BC a little bit then, or did you always stay?
At one point, I was there once a month for sure for a week. Yeah.
Wow.
And
how was that with the family?
The kids there was some high points and some low points, if you ask my wife.
Yeah.
Well, you must have missed Niagara, because even Niagara, you've been going through another revolution of change, another field of growth. So when that project got off the ground and everything, what was the next phase for Niagara for you? Well,
it's funny. Around the same time, we actually had a joint venture with the Boisset family out of Burgundy with the establishment of a winery or a brand called Le Clos Jourdain. Okay. And this is another pinch yourself moment. Although we never got to do everything I wanted, but we decided we wanted to have a really massive moment in Niagara and actually open up a flagship winery for Le Clos Jourdain, part of this joint venture with the Boisset family. And we hired one of the most famous architects in the world, Frank Gehry, who's Canadian, but he's from California. And so myself and Thomas Batchelder, who was the winemaker that we hired, we worked as part of the team that was working with Frank Gehry, who has done the Disney Opera House in LA, if you've ever seen it, the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, Spain. Yes. And he is the preeminent, it just was one of those aha moments.
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
We built that all the way to the design stage. We launched the fact that we were going to do that, and then the economic climate changed, the price of metal and titanium changed, and the price went through the roof. So we ended up having to cancel the project at the end of the day. But we didn't cancel Le Clos Jourdain. The brand was created and became one of the most celebrated Chardonnay and Pinot Noirs in Canada. It won the Judgment de Montreal as the best Chardonnay in the world back in the early 2000s. It went into a period of dormancy when we were owned by Constellation. And then when our current owners, which is the Teachers Pension Plan, bought us, we brought Le Clos Jourdain back to life, and we now have a home for it. So that's a long evolution. We opened it up.
And where is that located?
Out on the bench, just down from Jordan, Ontario, in Beamsville. And we bought actually the old Angels Gate Winery, then we renovated it and made it into a wonderful space for the club, for the Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, and for Thomas to have a home.
Wow.
And it's going to be a great success. I know it is.
Yeah, no, and that wasn't too long ago that you guys purchased.
Yeah, like this year.
Yeah, so, I was gonna say, I think I read about that in the newspaper. So, apart from you pretty much yourself, bringing the Arterra brand to what it is now. I know you spent a lot of time being on the board of governors for Niagara College, and a lot of times volunteering for other things too. So, probably another pinch me moment too to be on the board of governors for the most successful research college in Canada. So can you explain kind of how that moment felt when they approached you and said, "Hey, Del, hey, we want you to be on our team"?
Well, it's funny. I'll go back in time. When I first started with the company, I started working with Niagara College to ask them to adapt their program so that we had co-op programs that had the students going back in to school in October rather than September
Because of the harvest season.
And I remember meeting with them, which I don't know, for whatever reason, I had the chutzpah to do that.
Was it Patterson? Did Patterson at the time?
Yeah, Patterson and
Mark Nantel?
no, Mark wasn't there. Craig Udale
Okay,
and the
yes.
team, and so they said yes, that's a great idea. We'll change all of our programming schedules because it makes sense to have co-ops that work for you.
You must have just walked out of
And
there.
I was like, going,
look
well,
at me. I make decisions here.
yes.
you know what it showed to me is that partnership is a very big deal.
Yes.
In this region, but also at Niagara College. And so I worked with them for many years, just doing different committees and stuff. Then they asked me to join the board, and there's a term limit, 6 years.
Okay.
And in my 6th year, they asked if I wanted to be chair of the board. So
Beautiful. That's a great story. Fantastic. So, we learned so much about you, and I think, what we're starting to see a trend that you're not afraid to do things, to approach the beast, to say what you want to say, to get what you want to get done. Is that one of the skills that you think has that has provided the success that you have right now in life? Is to say, listen, I'm not afraid, and I'm going to take on that chance.
Yep. Well, this will sound kind of at one point they gave me an honorary degree at Niagara College, and my whole speech that I did when I was addressing all of the graduates was my favorite movie is The Dead Poets Society. Okay. And it sounds cliche, but the whole idea of carpe diem,
yes,
seize the day, boys, make your life extraordinary.
Yeah, exactly.
That's my ethos, right? So make every day an awesome day and absorb everything you can.
So how does that, what are some of the things that you do to instill that in your everyday practice?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I had a manager that I worked with. She always said to the staff, walk with purpose, right? Mm-hmm. Always have, it's funny, this was with hospitality, always have a rag in one hand, so you're always cleaning, always keep yourself busy. And all of those very simplistic little things, they don't sound all that, it's not like, what's
it's not groundbreaking.
Yeah, nothing like that, but walk with purpose, doesn't that, if you think about that,
yeah, it makes sense, right?
Makes a lot of sense,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. If you exude that confidence, then people are attracted to that confidence, right?
And then of course, being open to listen and be inquisitive and not judgmental, right? Mm-hmm. I think that was a Ted Lasso term, by the way. Might be quoting him.
Great show, yeah. Exactly.
But it's so true, right? Like don't be someone who wants to be very judgy with people all the time. To be inquisitive and learn. Mm-hmm.
So that's fantastic. Emma, I don't know if you had a question.
No, just because I was going to tie it all back to one of the first things you said when we sat down was like seizing opportunity, like that you just always were up for opportunity. And I think that's what set you apart. I was going to ask even if we can discuss a little bit about more Niagara and your investment and the opportunity you saw here. And then as well as, here you had a tour today of the Niagara Falls Innovation Hub. And I would love to tie in if you had an innovation hub or resources like this to network, to meet people, like-minded entrepreneurs, building those teams. If you have any advice for entrepreneurs that are joining the hub, or what would be the first type of questions you would ask and come into an innovation hub?
That's a good question.
Mm-hmm. She asks the hard ones.
Yeah, no.
I do the underhand pitches. She's doing fastball.
I'm quiet until I'm not quiet.
Well, it's funny. What I'll say is when I came here today, I had the same sort of tingling sensation I did when I had some of my first tours of Niagara College. And it was funny, it wasn't the winemaking side of things at Niagara College that got me all excited. It was when I got to go see all of the cool stuff that is going on. Stuff that is foreign to me that I don't understand, right? There's all those printers and stuff going on with bugs and stuff.
The
I'm
bugs.
like, this is so cool. And it makes me want to learn more. And part of it is like, why haven't I been here before? I should have come here earlier to learn. Mm-hmm. And each one of the people I met, I found applications of what they're doing that would benefit the business.
Yeah, absolutely.
That I have. So I think tell all of those people though to be tenacious and get out there and sell what they're doing, right? Because there's a lot and just keep knocking on the doors. People will answer eventually. So.
Well, it's crazy. People don't realize, Niagara, Niagara Falls and the Niagara region has some of Canada's largest brands, right? Talk about Arterra Wines, largest wine producer in Canada. Talk about Meridian, the largest credit union in Canada. You talk about Walker Industries, one of the largest environmental groups. You talk about Rankin Construction, one of the largest. Mm-hmm. So there seems to be a trend that, Niagara produces great organizations and great companies. So can you comment? I know you spent some time in BC, you spent some time, elsewhere in Toronto, but you came back to Niagara. So what was it that made you want to stay in Niagara and grow the brand in Niagara to be one of the best in Canada, or the best in Canada?
I mean, I was really drawn to the idea of being able to be part of something that is you could see was just, and truthfully, in the late 90s and early 2000s, that was when you could see that the Niagara wine industry was going to take off, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And knowing that you also had those other things, those other attractors of Niagara Falls and the people who are around, and not to mention that you have the golden horseshoe of millions and millions of people that come here. You have this opportunity that truthfully is easy to see how it's going to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely.
Right. So if you're doing your analysis, on what's the return on investment that you're going to have, you can kind of see in the Niagara region that there's a real chance to be able to make a go of it and be successful. You have connections to, whether it's, I think John Peller would say this all the time. I mean, in a 9-hour radius of here, you have hundreds of millions of people.
42% of North America's population within 8 hours.
Right.
Drive.
Like, so if you can't figure out a way to make it go in any business from a supply chain perspective, the QEW, the bridges, the access to the US, the waterways,
Canals,
you have it all.
Yeah.
You have it all here.
Exactly.
And it feels like a great place to be. And one of the things I have to say, though, I'm excited about that hoverlink thing.
Absolutely. Go to Toronto. Absolutely.
When I go to Toronto for meetings, I'm telling you, that's going to be
just going to hover across.
There's a lot more coming. And then, like you mentioned, your most recent initiative was opening in Beamsville, right? Was that why? So was Beamsville, was that always the location? Like that being in not Niagara Lake? Is the Benchlands also?
Yeah, I think, truthfully, some of the best wines are coming from the Beamsville bench and the escarpment, the limestone soil and everything that's there. It makes a lot of sense for a brand. Le Clos Jourdain has always been about a sense of place and about the actual terroir. So it made a lot of sense to be in that particular area. So choosing that location was very good. And what I would also say is the region was very happy to see Arterra finally make an investment with a winery there.
Sure.
Right. Yes. It is a bit of a flagpost. If we're making investments there, then it also spins off on a lot of other folks.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. Now the wine space is so competitive. You got, the Pellers, the Muratas, you have them all kind of trying to establish their presence here. So how does someone like you, who's at the forefront of it, stay ahead of the competition, keep innovating, keep coming up with the next best thing so that people always recognize that, their Arterra Wines will always be the number one brand in Canada. So what are some of the things that you and your team do to say, listen, let's stay ahead of the trends, let's innovate, let's create so that we're always, at the forefront?
Yeah, I mean, I'm proud of our company. We invest a lot of time and energy in being innovative, really understanding the data, spending a phenomenal amount of time trying to understand consumers, their behaviors, what they want to have, and so on and so forth. And so we also take a lot of risks, right? I mean, we do a lot of innovative new brands. A whole bunch of them don't work, right?
Yeah, of course.
Right. And that's just the way it works. And we're willing to take those risks. But some brands that we launched, like we have a brand called Basque that is a low sugar, low calorie brand.
Find at the wine rack.
This is now one of the number one selling wine brands in Canada, right? And in just a few years, right?
Yeah.
Because it was an innovation that we saw the space that was out there. Consumers wanted it.
And they went into the canned version too, because I had some Basque. When it was, I remember when it was COVID, the wine rack was the only place that was open pretty much. So I had my fun with Basque beverages.
But I will say, it's not to say that we're always ahead of our competition either, right? Every now and then you need the competition to come up with something and you go, okay.
Bring it on.
We got to pull up our socks here, right? Because there's a lot of really interesting things happening in that space, and so it keeps you young by watching what's happening.
So now I have a question, kind of a little bit off topic, but you seem that my understanding of the youth right now seems that there's a big trend on non-alcoholic beverage. So is there any plans for Arterra to open up some non-alcoholic versions of wines and stuff like that to cater to the new youth? I wouldn't even say millennial, probably Gen Zs or something like that.
Yeah, or whatever, alpha or whatever is going to be up next for the drinking age. Yeah,
there is a phenomenal amount of conversation going on. We do have some wines that are non-alcoholic that we have being produced for us, but we're trying to understand the science of it.
Sure.
and also understanding the nuances of what it would take to be able to make non-alcoholic wines in our current facilities that we have, because it changes everything. Everything from a regulatory processing, CFIA, everything changes. So you have to start thinking about, do I need to have a separate facility to make this in?
It's almost like
do I need to look at something else? So
Canada cross
I would say your timing on this is impeccable, because it's certainly something that is being discussed. We want to do it right.
Yeah.
And there'll be more on that to come.
Oh, I can't wait to hear.
Well, this is a good segment of, we always do something like a what's next initiative. I don't know if you have any other upcoming projects.
You can share any secrets that you can share with our
listeners? I think what we're going through in my current job as head of corporate affairs, I spent a lot of time in the regulatory and government space.
Yes.
Retail modernization in Ontario, as an example.
Well, that's exactly it. Now you're being able to sell in convenience stores.
The biggest change in alcohol beverage retail in Ontario for 96 years is happening this year. And so going from a sort of restricted marketplace where you had a government monopoly called the LCBO and a handful of wine stores and a handful of beer stores, which was, I don't know, call it 1,200 different points of access, to 8,500 points of access in 3 months.
So my question is, like, how does that affect you? Because now it's supply chain. Now you guys have to have deliveries out to these stores and things like that too.
It is. I have a team of people, three people full time for the last 5 years. Every hour of every day is spent on modeling how this new process will work. And then in the last number of months, there's been 3 other new project teams that have been created that are working on how do we make sure that our wine rack stores continue to thrive.
So you guys own the wine rack, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay,
164 stores. So that's a big new amount of competition for them.
Well, sure, right? Because now people are not going to go to the wine racks; they're going to go to their gas station.
We're going to get them to go to wine rack. That's our plan.
Perfect.
But how is it? How is this new ecosystem going to work, and how are you going to be successful? And think about 6,500 convenience stores, the supply chain that you need to deal with to deliver to all those places.
Oh, gosh.
The complexity is mind-blowing.
Can I hear your prediction, even if you want to share, without giving away too much strategy or anything, what your prediction of what's going to happen with that?
Well, it's going to be interesting. Like, convenience is going to be probably more of a beer play than a wine play, if we're honest, right? Wine will be there.
Yes.
But I'd say probably 8 to 9 out of 10 of the purchases will be beer for people going in there. A lot of single serve, all that kind of stuff. The bigger change will be grocery. Let's just be honest.
You go to States, like when I go to Florida all the time, boom, you have wine aisles in the grocery store.
So the LCBO is going to have to really sort of shrink their retail footprint.
That's what I thought,
They're going to have to change their footprint to be really about vintages, and also maybe the value proposition because of price floors that they have.
Which is crazy because they just literally went through a whole rechange of putting in a vintage wine section and things like that too, right?
So it's really disruptive at the moment, but I think the average consumer, like I probably go to the grocery store 3 times a week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to buy my wine there.
Yeah. Well, why wouldn't you, right? Why make another trip? So and two is that, from friends, I have friends that own breweries and wineries too. You have to pay a certain percentage to be in the LCBO.
Oh, yeah.
So how is that going to change now when you have convenience stores selling in grocery stores? Do you still have to pay that much? Or are you going to say, the heck with that, I'm going to go strictly to grocery stores because I'm going to spend less money?
And not only have they changed that they're opening up access, but they also, we were one price. You were only allowed to sell your bottle if it was a $10.95 bottle of wine. It had to be sold at that price everywhere. So it was a one price model. They've unlocked pricing now.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's going to really...
That's interesting.
Convenience stores can charge whatever they want. Grocery can charge whatever they want, right? You have all of these different things, nuances that have changed.
Interesting.
Tax included or not included in the price. Sure. That's unlocked.
Well,
how are you going to do your pricing structure?
So it sounds like they've opened it wide. They're going to see how it goes. We're going to look at the data and go from there.
There must be an election coming soon.
But I also, the writing was on the wall. You saw what they did with cannabis, right?
Yeah.
When did this first? Because you said 5 years ago, or something you hired. When did this first come across your desk?
So I started working on this probably 2015.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
2015, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Kathleen Wynne was the first person when she was premier. She opened up the opportunity to have wine and beer in 450 grocery stores.
Yep. Because that's new-ish in the last decade too.
Yeah. And so that was the first tranche. And then when the Premier Ford came in, and he sort of said, I just want to blow the barn doors open and let it go. And so it's been my main file that I've been working on for, easily 10, 12 years. And it's fascinating, but it's also, I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of risk for our company, but there's also a lot of opportunity. And this is a pinch yourself moment, because how often can you say that you're actually in the front seat, in some cases, the driver's seat of the biggest modernization in history?
Yeah, exactly. Since Prohibition.
It's frightening.
Yeah.
And scary, because there's, it used to be, for me, just to articulate this, it used to be, am I going to sell a couple extra cases a day at my winery?
Sure.
To I've got 1,000 employees in Wine Rack that I have to worry about still having a job.
Well, that's exactly
6 million cases that we make, 800 acres of vineyard, 100 grape growing families that we buy fruit from, that I want to make sure everybody remains viable with. And I don't want you to think this is all me. I have my team, our president, everyone is invested beyond compare to make sure that this works out good, not only for Arterra, but we spend a phenomenal amount of time representing the entire domestic industry to make sure we're going to succeed. Right?
Absolutely, and it must be a scary thing. I know that we could talk about this forever. I think we have to bring you back on and have a separate conversation, because I have a million more questions. But as we're wrapping up, we always ask all of our guests here to say, listen, what are some of the tips and tricks you can explain of your own life? Whether that's waking up and making your bed every morning, or some of the business knowledge that you and the skills that you portray on a daily basis, to keep your success up, to keep your motivation up, to keep you being the person you're being. So what are some of the tips and tricks you can share with our listeners to say, this is what made me and this is what I do to continue making me the person I am today?
Okay. So you guys have obviously heard, there's two sayings. There's early bird catches the worm, or second mouse gets the cheese, right?
Sure, yes.
I'm an early bird catches the worm kind of person.
Perfect, yeah,
right? I think trying to be ahead of the curve, trying to get to work early, getting up early and being thoughtful, spending time by yourself, being able to be reflective on what you need to accomplish that day before everything goes crazy is huge for me. This is my hospitality training. Lateness drives me absolutely insane.
Okay.
You invariably, in anything you're going to do in life, you have a team.
Yes.
And if you have the team waiting for you, and you're late constantly, everybody has to be late once in a while, but to be present and be there with everyone completely invested, it to me is very, very important. Surround yourself with people who are different than you. As I say, smarter than you, if you can find that.
Well, that's my team for sure.
Look for dissenters in the room. A lot of people, when you look at a construction of a board or something like that, they want to find people who are similar to them. The best people to have in those rooms are the dissenters, the people who are going to challenge you to think differently.
Sure.
It makes you feel uncomfortable.
But that's life.
Mackerel, but you need that.
Yeah.
Because then you can rumble and come up, you can get into the arena with them and scrum, and you'll come up with a better idea at the end of the day. And then I always fail at this, but try to make sure, I don't like the word balance that people talk about, but your family is bloody important.
Yes, absolutely.
And you have to somehow make sure that you make the time for that aspect. Otherwise, it can make you go sideways. And
so, what are some of the things you do to find that time for family?
We literally try to have family dinner every single night.
Yep.
Where we're sitting around the table, we don't have people in separate rooms, and
no, exactly.
Every single night is very ambitious. That is really.
I'm not saying we succeed at it all the time, but we would try. And I am blessed to be married to a chef who also.
I was gonna say I'd be there every day too.
For food, right?
Yeah, I'd be there every day.
But trying to have family dinners was always important. Trying to with my wife to try to make sure that we were having those times just the two of us, right, and not always dealing with the sort of chaos. As I said, I would fail at those things all the time, but trying to make sure you always get regrounded in the importance of that aspect of your life. And the last part, this sounds cliche, but have fun.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Life is way too short to be angry all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah. It sounds like if you show up, on time, opportunities, they'll come to you, right? Yep. And have fun with it.
Mm-hmm. And so some of the things you talked about family is also things you can talk about with your employees too. Like, try to not have employee lunches every single day, but try to meet with your team every single day, stay on top of them, and keep that communication, those lines of communication open, because that's the way you will succeed. So, Del, this has been fantastic. If people want to, get in contact perhaps with you, do you have a LinkedIn that they can reach out to?
Yes, absolutely.
So is it just Del Rollo?
Yeah, they'll find me on there.
One L
for sure. Yeah,
one L, two L's, right?
Yeah, one L, two L's. You got
one L
yeah.
on the D, and a Del, and two on the Rollo. And then Emma, where can people find our podcast?
Oh, of course. So, of course, today we're in the Niagara Falls Innovation Hub. This is the Made in the Mist podcast, of course, on Apple Podcasts. We got it on Spotify, and we'll have it on YouTube as well, the video version.
And perfect. Yes, like I said, in the Money Mint podcast studio, we want to thank our listeners so much. We want to thank Del for coming on, sharing your amazing journey to success. And I know that we'll have you back on to see how the next couple of months go on this big rollout of, like I said, wine and other alcoholic beverages being sold everywhere. So thank you so much for the opportunity. I've learned so much. I'm sure Emma has too, and I'm sure listeners have too. So really appreciate the time.
Thank you. And you guys are doing great work here. Keep it up.
Awesome. Thanks.